The little girl stood alone beside a folding table, clutching a paper plate with trembling hands, while across the crowded community hall, her mother silently wiped away tears she prayed nobody would see. It was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it had become the most humiliating night of her life. And then, in the middle of that painful moment, she looked at a stranger and asked a question that would change both of their lives forever. "Can you pretend to be my brother?" What happened next stunned everyone. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales for more emotional stories that warm the soul. The afternoon sun poured golden light over the small town of Maple Ridge. The streets were lined with old brick buildings and flowering trees that swayed gently in the summer breeze. It looked like the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. For some people, that felt comforting. For others, it felt impossible to escape their past. Marina Hale had lived there her entire life. At 32 years old, she was raising her 8-year-old daughter, Ivy, alone. Every morning before sunrise, Marina cleaned offices downtown. During the day she worked at a grocery store. At night she handled bookkeeping for a local mechanic. Sleep had become a luxury she could rarely afford. But no matter how exhausted she felt, she always smiled for Ivy. Her daughter was the brightest part of her world. Years earlier, Marina's husband had walked away without warning. He left debts behind, broken promises, and a little girl who spent months asking when her father was coming home. Eventually the questions stopped. The silence that replaced them hurt even more. Life became a constant battle. Bills piled up. The roof leaked. The old car barely ran. Yet Marina kept going because that was what mothers did. She carried every burden herself. What hurt most wasn't the struggle. It was the loneliness. Every school event, every holiday gathering, every family celebration reminded her of what was missing. Meanwhile, several miles away, Rowan Mercer lived in a world that appeared completely different. As CEO of one of the region's fastest-growing technology companies, Rowan possessed everything most people dreamed of. A beautiful home. Financial security. Professional success. Yet every evening he returned to an empty house carrying a sadness money could never fix. 3 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness. Since then, he had dedicated himself to raising his 10-year-old son, Theo. The company grew. His bank account grew. But the emptiness remained. Theo noticed it too. Sometimes Rowan would catch his son staring at old family photographs with eyes far older than a child should have. Father and son loved each other deeply, but grief had built invisible walls around both of them. Then came the annual Family Unity Festival. The event was one of Maple Ridge's biggest traditions. Families gathered for food, games, performances, and community awards. Ivy had spent weeks preparing for a children's choir performance. She was excited beyond words. Until Marina received a phone call. The choir director explained that participating families would be introduced on stage before the performance. Parents, grandparents, siblings, uncles, aunts, everyone would be recognized. The director meant no harm. But Marina immediately understood the problem. Ivy would be the only child standing alone. No father. No grandparents. No relatives nearby. Nobody. That night she heard her daughter crying softly behind a closed bedroom door. The sound shattered her heart. A few days later, the festival arrived. The weather was beautiful. Music floated through the air. Children laughed. Families posed for pictures. Marina tried to stay cheerful, but anxiety followed her like a shadow. As evening approached, introductions began. One family after another walked proudly onto the stage. Cheers erupted throughout the crowd. Then Ivy's name was called. The little girl stepped forward. Marina followed. And suddenly the enormous stage felt painfully empty. A few whispers drifted through the audience. Some people weren't being cruel. They were simply noticing. But to Marina, every glance felt like another wound. Afterward, Ivy smiled bravely, yet Marina saw disappointment hidden behind her eyes. The little girl wandered toward the refreshment tables while Marina stood alone near the back of the hall fighting tears. That was when she noticed Rowan Mercer. Everyone in town knew who he was. The successful businessman. The respected leader. The widowed father. He stood quietly beside Theo, looking just as uncomfortable among the crowds as she felt. For several minutes Marina argued with herself. The idea seemed ridiculous. Embarrassing. Impossible. Yet desperation often creates courage. Before she could lose her nerve, she approached him. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. She explained the situation. She explained Ivy's sadness. And finally she asked the question. Could he pretend to be her brother for the remainder of the evening? Just for tonight. Just so her daughter wouldn't feel so alone. For a moment Rowan simply stared at her. Not because the request was strange. But because he recognized something in her eyes. Exhaustion. Pride. Pain. The same emotions he saw in the mirror every morning. Then he glanced toward Ivy. The little girl sat by herself watching other families laugh together. His heart tightened. He thought about Theo. He thought about loneliness. He thought about how much courage it must have taken for Marina to ask. And finally he smiled. For tonight, yes. Something remarkable happened after that. Rowan stepped naturally into the role. He joined Marina and Ivy at activities. He cheered during games. He laughed at terrible jokes. He carried trays of food. To outsiders, they genuinely looked like family. More importantly, Ivy looked happier with every passing hour. The transformation was impossible to miss. The little girl glowed. For the first time all day, she laughed freely. Theo gradually joined them too. At first he remained cautious. Then Ivy challenged him to a ring toss competition. Within minutes they were running through the festival grounds together. Watching the children play, Rowan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Meanwhile Marina found herself relaxing for the first time in months. There was no pressure. No judgment. No expectations. Just simple companionship. As darkness settled over Maple Ridge, strings of lights illuminated the festival grounds. Music drifted through the warm evening air. Families danced. Children chased fireflies. The temporary arrangement should have ended there. But fate had other plans. Several weeks later, Ivy developed a severe case of pneumonia. Marina rushed her to the hospital. Medical bills quickly became overwhelming. Work shifts were missed. Income disappeared. Stress consumed her. One evening she sat beside Ivy's hospital bed trying to calculate expenses when she heard a familiar voice. Rowan stood in the doorway. He had learned about Ivy through mutual acquaintances. Without hesitation he offered help. Not charity. Not pity. Help. Real help. The kind offered by someone who understood struggle. Over the following weeks he visited frequently. Theo came too. The children grew closer. So did the adults. Conversations became longer. Trust grew deeper. Stories were shared. Wounds were revealed. Marina spoke about abandonment. Rowan spoke about grief. Both listened. Neither judged. Slowly, two lonely lives began intertwining. Months passed. Autumn arrived. Then winter. The friendship remained. Neither person rushed anything. Neither expected anything. Yet everyone around them noticed. Theo smiled more. Ivy laughed more. Even Marina and Rowan seemed lighter. As if years of carrying burdens alone were finally ending. Then came Christmas Eve. Snow blanketed Maple Ridge. Lights shimmered in every window. The four of them gathered at Rowan's house for dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just warmth. Conversation. Togetherness. After the meal, the children fell asleep beside the fireplace. Marina watched them quietly. Theo's head rested against Ivy's shoulder. They looked like siblings. Like family. Tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness. From gratitude. Because she finally understood something important. The greatest miracles rarely arrive dramatically. They arrive through kindness. Through small decisions. Through ordinary people choosing to care. Across the room, Rowan noticed her expression. He realized he felt the same way. The night Marina had asked him to pretend to be her brother, neither of them expected anything beyond a few hours of comfort. Instead, that single act of compassion had changed everything. A year later, Maple Ridge hosted another family unity festival. This time the scene looked very different. When introductions began, Ivy stood proudly on stage. Beside her stood Marina. Beside Marina stood Rowan. And next to him stood Theo. The crowd applauded. But what moved people most wasn't who stood there. It was how they stood there. Together. No pretending. No loneliness. No empty spaces. Just a family built not by obligation but by love, understanding, and kindness. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden inside this story. Sometimes the people who heal us are complete strangers at first. Sometimes one simple act of compassion creates a future nobody could have imagined. Sometimes the family we need arrives in the most unexpected way. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales for more emotional journeys like this one. Special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act of compassion can transform someone's future. As the festival lights glowed against the evening sky and laughter echoed across the town square, Marina looked at Rowan and remembered the question that had started everything. "Can you pretend to be my brother?" The answer had only been meant for one night. But life had quietly written a different ending. Because sometimes the most beautiful relationships begin with a simple act of kindness. And sometimes, when two broken hearts help each other heal, they discover they were never strangers at all. They were simply family waiting to find one another.